Hi, I'm Jennet Ingle, the 5 Minute Reedmaker. If you're watching this on YouTube, please go ahead and click subscribe for me, and that way you'll always know when I drop a new episode, and it will be easier for other people to find my channel and to become better reedmakers and happier musicians. Thank you. This last weekend, I was at an oboe double reed day. This past weekend, I was the featured guest at a double reed day in Nebraska, and I was leading a reed making workshop, and I had two conversations with people, attendees there. One person said, "How do I deal with the fact that my reeds always seem to have leaks high up in the reed? Not down at the thread, but like up toward the heart. How do I handle that?" The other person said, "How do I deal with the fact that even though I'm overlapping in the correct direction for a right-handed person, the overlap changes like crazy. Even after I open the reed and when I start working on it, it just gets wider and wider and wider, and I have to keep cutting off the edges until I end up with this ridiculous skinny thing. How do I handle that?" And in both cases, I was able to look at their reads. This is the magic of being in person rather than like trying to diagnose over the internet, which I also do. But it became very obvious very quickly that both of these issues were coming from the fact that the reed maker had overwound, had gone past the end of the tube when they were winding, which you can see easily by measuring, making sure that the distance from the bottom of the cork to the top of the thread is 47 millimeters or less, and if it's more, or just by looking at the way the throat of the reed looks. In one case, it was very, very clear that the winding had compressed the cane above the staple. In the other, it was a little bit less visually apparent, but measuring made it clear that she was a few winds over. And overwinding, going beyond the top of your metal tube, is almost always a fatal flaw. And look, I talk about it as like a newbie mistake, but this is still something that to this day is challenging for me too. I will show you. Here's a reed that showed up in my own case, and I wound it myself. And, I had gotten it through day 2 or day 3, and I thought maybe it was going to become a reed, so I slid it into my actual case because I needed reeds to start practicing on to break in for my actual playing. And, I got it through a practice session, sort of, but it felt bad to me. It felt like I couldn't put the real amount of air through it. It felt shallow. It felt peculiar. And here, I will beep and crow it at you. The beep, it works, but it feels very shallow and light to me. And I can get a crow. So as I worked on this reed, I initially thought, okay, if I just keep scraping, perhaps it will come together. Here's what it sounded like on the oboe. So it's really sort of inoffensive in its tone quality, but I don't know if you noticed, I felt and perceived that my left hand notes, my G, A, B, C notes, really the ABCs, felt shallow, felt a little thin, felt like they weren't quite honest, and I couldn't quite put real air through them. And when I pulled this out in the orchestra just to do a little bit of, tutti playing, it was immediately apparent to me that this reed was not viable in those registers. So I took a closer look. And indeed, I think you can see that here on the left, and you can see it from this side as well, that one final wind of cane is compressing the cane just a little bit. There's just a little bit of a there, as though you're wearing the reed is wearing a turtleneck that's just a little bit too tight and a little bit too tall. And when I measure, Like, we are not worlds above 47, but we are just a little bit above. And here's why this matters. The staple itself is an extension of the bore of your oboe. The oboe has a conical bore, so at the very top of the interior of your instrument, like, it really is only this large. It's tiny, tiny, tiny. And then the proportions of the staple, as it moves from round down here to oval up here, dictate a lot of the playing, dictate a lot about the tone, the intonation, the freedom or restriction of how the air travels into the instrument. And the whole reason that we use staples, that we use these metal tubes, is so we can have consistency. From one to the next to the next, this is how the relatively flat reed becomes a round opening and transitions into the rest of your oboe. So when we wind the cane on, of course, we're basically trying to make sure that the air can travel into the staple and then into the oboe. But if you wind a little bit past the end of the tube, as I myself have done right here, suddenly you are compressing the cane just a little bit beyond the top of the tube, and that is a disruption in that bore shape that we're trying to be consistent with. And it is damaging to this piece of cane itself, which is an organic material. When you overwind, it happens that this reed doesn't share the symptoms of those two people that I spoke with at Double Reed Day. It's not really leaking up in this area. It's not wildly crazy with its overlap. But, I mean, you can see, even just looking at this, I wasn't aware of the overwind. And so as I was trying to adjust this reed and make it work, I went quite a long way. Like, the reed is short at this point. I think my rooftop is no more than 64 millimeters. The overall length is quite short. Like, it's below, just around 69, which is short for me. And all of that work is work that I did to try to compensate for this problem, which, if I had noticed it earlier, would have just been a reason to abandon the reed. Because an overwound reed has a fatal flaw that you probably will not be able to overcome, regardless of what the symptom is that that's causing. Here's my sure way to know whether you have overwound or not. I'm just going to break it off. And notice that as I, bend the cane over, if I had not been overwound, the thread would have stayed down. But this travels right over the top, so indeed, that is an overwound reed. And will not be, obviously it's not now a viable reed, but it wouldn't have ever turned into a viable reed. If you are having difficulties with inconsistent openings, inconsistent leaking of your reed, some sort of like craziness with the overlap that is doing unexpected things for you, if some of your reeds, even though you're using the same shape all the time, seem wide and some seem narrow, if your ruler tells you that you have gone past the top of the tube, that is a reason to give up on a reed. Let it go. Make a new reed. Reeds are an abundant and renewable resource. I hope that this has been helpful to you. If you need to reach me to order reeds or cane, non-overwound reeds, let's assume, or let's see, a copy of my book, The Happiest Musician, or if you're interested in sending reeds to me for Reed Repair Shop, or if you have a question that I could answer in a future 5 Minute Reedmaker episode, you can reach me at jennetingle.com. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great day.